finding the bass sound. So in the previous clip, we were looking at the bass and talking about some effects with the mixer, and as I played it, there's a little bit of distortion. Now I want to go through and just give you a little heads up on this, because as we start mixing, this is going to become critical, and that's in the audio settings. I'm using the Audio for All version 2 driver, and what was happening was I had the setting down here at 256, which when I start getting instruments and samples loading and then using different effects, it becomes a problem in the sense that we don't have the processing power then. So what I had to do is actually turn this up to 1024, and then it was working just fine. So I close that out, push play. Now the one thing this will do is give you a little bit of delay or latency when you play a keyboard. Just a fraction. It can be a little unnerving for musicians who are used to having instant access to things, but it takes a little getting used to, and then you'll be able to play. But you may need to reduce that when you're recording if you have a really technical part and you need to have exact timing. Otherwise it'll be okay. So what we're going to do now is find the bass sound that we want. First place I'm going to do that with is the sound source. And I think it's okay at a certain point here to work with the sound isolated from the rest of what we have. However, when we do the final mix, everything's going to be done mostly together. So you're going to have the drums and the bass and the keys and the melody and all that stuff all playing at once, so you get a good idea of how it sounds, but not isolated like this, because we can make this bass sound great all by itself, but then it may step on some of the other parts in terms of the frequency range. For example, you may have low frequencies from the bass, low frequencies from the low kick sounds, you may have low frequencies from the keyboard sounds, from the melody sounds, and all of a sudden you have way too much low frequency, and that's something we're going to have to avoid. So it's dangerous to mix things by themselves. However, at this point I'm really just finding sounds and make sure I like the sound of the bass, and then when we mix we'll make other alterations. So let's push play. I'm going to get rid of some of this treble and mids, because for this song I want more of a presence with the bass, but not a real distinct sound coming from it. For instance, let's just play this and I'll show you what I mean. So you see now we just have kind of a presence there. It's actually kind of hard to hear a little bit. When I turn it to the right level though, it's going to be very much a filler out for the whole song. Let's unsolo our bass now and hear this a little bit with the other drums. So it's more of a presence now than anything, and that's perfect. One other thing I'm thinking about doing here is adding a little bit of effect to this. I really do like adding some things like flanging or chorusing to this. Let's just try a little bit of that for a moment to hear how it sounds. I'm going to find a preset here. And that's just adding a little character to it. It's not really doing too much, but a little bit. I'm going to take off the compressor here. I'm going to switch it with something else. Let's see what we have here. I want to do a little bit of squeeze. We could try squeezing it. Or we also have, let's see, we have soft clipper, which could be interesting for a bass. Peak controller, which could be interesting. Things that control dynamic range and really squash it, which I'm totally okay with. We have a limiter, which we might try, and even a distortion unit would do the same thing. But let's see if there's anything else here that looks interesting for this. The limiter looks like this, and it's actually a pretty advanced tool. Let's see what kind of presets we have on this, and I think we could do either for drums would be okay as a preset, or a max loudness with slight saturation. And then we may have to get ready to turn down the overall level here of that particular instrument. What this does is control the overall dynamics of it, and similar to the same settings I talked about in the compressor in the previous clip, we have an attack, a release. This has a look ahead, which means it's actually going to analyze what's coming before it actually comes so that it can even do a better job of pulling the dynamics down. And then we have a gain, and we have a ceiling. So this is like the threshold, and then a saturation. So this is going to emulate kind of like a tape or tube or analog type feel. And then we have a noise gate to get rid of any noise that's not actual signal. So in some ways a lot simpler, but in other ways very cool sounding. Now we can also switch to compression here, which actually has the ratio, the threshold, and the knee, just like we were looking for before, but I'm using just the limiter primarily in this case. Okay, so let's close that for a minute. I think we're getting to a bass sound that I like here. Now, if we wanted to, we could also automate some of these levels, but we're not to that point. We don't have a song yet, so the mix is going to have to come a little bit later. So I think for the moment, let's end the discussion about the bass now that we have some of these things in place, and let's move on to the next section.